Good afternoon. My name is Whitney Stoll. I'm your DC Post First Friday webinar host, and welcome back to our webinar series and our May webinar with our guest Al LeBlanc from CDM Smith on PFAS compliance by 2029, rapid pathways to success. Joined by me is Samantha Long and Bree Beal, who are behind the scenes moderating our webinar today and will also be monitoring the chat. So we have over 75 registered participants from all over the world ready to learn for today's First Friday webinar. In today's webinar, Al is going to be going through the latest updates in PFAS compliance and share a case study in his recent work on a U.S. Navy funded project. But first, I'd like to start our webinar by introducing you to our First Friday webinar series, which is provided to you through SAME's commitment to offering the AEC community effective training, development, and networking programs. The DC Post is helping sustain the future of the profession with these monthly education-focused sessions aligned with SAME's strategic goals to drive partnerships, deliver solutions, and develop people. So thank you all again for joining us here today as we start our program. So please use the chat to introduce yourself, share your LinkedIn profile, and contact information with everyone and throughout the program today. Ask questions in chat, and so we can address them during the Q&A portion at the end. Also, for those using the WebEx desktop application, you have the option to save the chat at any time by going up to File, down to Save As, and Save Chat. So we are recording this webinar, and the video will be on our YouTube channel later on this month. A copy of the slides, your PDH certificate, and the opt-in list of attendees will be emailed to you as soon as this webinar ends. So look for an email labeled document delivery in the subject line with your downloads following the end of this webinar session. We're excited to provide you an hour of education and virtual networking no matter where you're calling in from. We would like to take a moment to thank our DC Post First Friday sponsors, Fox Rothschild, KCCT, Parsons, and Stantec. We do truly appreciate your support, and we are grateful for your generosity by making this webinar series possible for our members and our SAME community. If you're not already a DC Post sponsor and would like to support our post with annual sponsorship, we'd love to be able to add your name to this slide for future programs and events this year. Annual Platinum sponsors and First Friday sponsors help support this webinar with free registration for members and full-time students. So please visit our website for more information about sponsorship levels and how you can get back to the SAME community through your DC Post sponsorship. So now it's time for the main program. Please note this program will provide one professional development hour from the DC Post. And I'm not going to read through the learning objectives on the slides since most of you read the same objectives when you registered. I'm going to introduce to you our featured speaker in just a moment. And as I mentioned before, while I do the introduction, if you haven't done so already, please use the chat to introduce yourself, share any contact information, include your LinkedIn profile, and also where you're joining us from today. This is your webinar series, and to help you learn about this very special topic, as well as help you expand your business network during the program. Also, please use the chat throughout this presentation to share comments and ask questions to our presenters. If there's a particular slide you'd like to talk about, share that detail in your chat as well, and we will answer the questions at the end, the questions in the chat at the end of the program. And don't forget to save the chat before you exit. And now, please allow me to welcome our presenter and to the First Friday webinar. Please join me in welcoming Al LeBlanc, a senior water treatment expert at CDM Smith. Al has over 25 years of experience, has led PFAS treatment and compliance efforts across the country, helping utilities navigate complex regulatory and technical challenges with proven real-world solutions. So welcome, Al. Now I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Okay, thanks, Whitney, and I'll do the sharing thing, which is the challenging part of any webinar. And Whitney, can you see the screen successfully?
Hang on, I think it's probably loading.
can try that again.
There we go.
Okay, if that's okay, I'm going to roll.
Yep, you're good. All you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Our time budget is such that we're going to leave time for questions, answers, and closing business. So I'll make a concerted effort to wrap up by 12:45, 12:50 at the very, very latest. So rapid pathways to compliance by 2029 with PFAS and drinking water. A lot of times I feel that the introductions of a speaker are only marginally interesting, and they're probably that way here. But I'll say this, I come from a civil engineering background. I got a degree at Northeastern University and then Colorado State University. And I say that to note that I come to you not as an organic chemist or a regulatory lecturer, but rather a person that has worked with water utilities for 30 years now and PFAS quite a bit. The other relevant background, I'm based in the Northeast. I travel the country and beyond, but the Northeastern states were among the first to regulate PFAS at a state level. So that gave us a lot of practice and a lot of experience. So those are the relevant add-ons to the background, and I'm going to launch from there. We have learning objectives, which were stated. We're going to talk about moving PFAS designs along quickly. We're going to talk about common technologies, constituents that can get in our way. And fourth, we want to talk about some pitfalls that we can avoid during design and during operations. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the regulatory scene, because that's why we are doing this. We're going to talk about treatment and treatment for PFAS in the drinking water arena. We'll talk with some emphasis on the approach and the timeline. We're going to hit case studies for sure. We're going to talk about the residuals toward the end of the job, end of the program, and public communications, which are very important. So we'll wrap it up like that. And so we're going to start with the regulatory review just to get the crowd warmed up on what the regs say about PFAS in drinking water. And so this big day came along in April 2024, which is already a year ago, that the final PFAS National Primary Drinking Water Regulation came along. And it's pretty strict, no bones about it. The states that had previously regulated PFAS in one way or another had governed individual compounds or groups of compounds. But the federal regs are fairly strict, and they came out April 2024. It was very big news. We saw it coming a little bit. The draft rule was floated in 2023, and so I guess as an industry, we had some warning that this was coming. I'll certainly acknowledge that there's a lot going on in the federal government these days, but for now, this is what we are following, and we encourage people to stay the course and treat water, right? Everybody wants clean water no matter what, and we're going to talk about what the rules say. And so here's the only foray into organic chemistry that you will hear on this broadcast. So the term is PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, PFAS. Over the years, people have called them PFCs, and some people call them PFOAs, but PFAS is an array of man-made chemicals. There are thousands of them, and they're troublesome, right? They're troublesome to human health. And so the two most famous PFAS out of the thousands are these two on the screen, PFOA and PFOS. And they're featured by these really strong carbon and fluorine bonds that are very, very difficult to break up. It's one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. And so that means they're challenging to treat, although there are ways to treat, and they require special attention. We have the molecule on there just for fun, but you all know this likely by now. The PFAS compounds are in all kinds of things. They're in my rainproof coat. They're in cosmetics and shampoos and lipstick. They're certainly in firefighting foams and Scotchgard carpets. So PFAS are all around us, and we're here to talk about how to tackle it as drinking water suppliers, utilities, managers, engineers, and operators. We talk about the regulations, and the MCL for PFAS they're pretty low and they vary by compound. So I mentioned two of them in the prior slide, PFOA, PFAS. They're 4.0 is the practical quantitation limit. And you can read down the list. Gen X is a family of PFAS. It's a manufactured process. There are other PFAS which have a practical quantitation limit. And that's an important value in calculating compliance. So we can see those very low limits. I'll draw the attention to, before we go further, this is parts per trillion and nanograms per liter, which are one and the same. And this is pretty unique in the world of water treatment. Most of our contaminants are governed at the milligram per liter or microgram per liter range. So this is a very small amount of contaminant can do some damage. And so the regulations, continuing what the regs say, MCL 4.0 for PFOA, PFAS. There's this so-called hazard index, which is a new-ish thing that may not be greater than 1 when we have 2 or more of the PFNA, PFH, XS, PFBS, Gen X. And so the hazard index is a little bit new to a lot of us. It's calculated by the formula at the bottom. I sample my water, I bring it to the lab, and I get the results for Gen X, PFBS, and so forth across the screen. I fill in those results in the blue dot, and I divide by the health-based water concentration. So I do the math, and I come out to a hazard index that I am hoping is less than 1. And bottom bullet here, the individual MCLs for some of the others are at 10 nanograms per liter. It's done with health effects in mind by the EPA. Another thing that I am not a toxicologist, but there's a good amount of thinking behind the numbers. And so we talk about our compliance calculations, and it's not just a one-shot deal, I pass, I fail. It's a running annual average, kind of like disinfection byproducts, if you will. So a running annual average tells me if I'm compliant or not. These practical quantitation limits are really important because if I'm below the PQL, I consider it 0. And so here's an example calculation where 3 of the PFOA results were below the PQL. I get to count those as 0 in my running annual average math. And that's certainly helpful in this example. It puts me below 4.0. And we're looking good. So there's a lot of detail, a lot of nuance in the PFAS rule. There's another illustration of that. You might say, what's the big deal, those significant figures? But they're very, very significant. The EPA rule, which goes on for 600 pages or more, talks about significant figures and how they're handled. So if I get PFOA, the MCL is 4.0, and the rule tells me how to round. So if I get 4.04, I'm good. If I get 4.05 PFOA, I round up to 4.1 per the rule, and I'm in exceedance. It gets even more interesting, say with PFNA at 10. It tells me that 14.9 gets rounded down in a certain way to 10, and I'm compliant. 15, I exceed. And so it's pretty interesting that there's such significance in the significant figures. It's a lot of important detail in the rule. There's a compliance monitoring spelled out in the rule. We got to go out and monitor quarterly. We use all samples in the RAA, running annual average calculation, and states are empowered to increase the monitoring frequency if they so see fit. So lots of requirements and stipulations in the rule. There's guidance on the laboratory methods, EPA 533 or 537.1 version 2.0 to the lab people in the crowd. Those are how we measure for PFAS. It's important to note that we don't have a PFAS analyzer that we just wire up at the water treatment plant. These are typically collected samples that are sent to a lab that is certified and ready to go with these 2 EPA methods. And so there's also other initial monitoring guidance in the rule for folks' consumption. So again, we're going to keep it quick here. There are trigger levels for reduced monitoring. Trigger levels that's a phrase that's used by EPA in the rule. So at half the MCL, we can look at reduced monitoring. And again, I just illustrate this to, again, make the point. There's a lot in the rule, a lot of detail. And as we get closer to 2027 and 2029, we're all going to immerse in these details. So there's lots of good reading. There's public notification. I'm going to make a remark on public communications toward the end of this talk. But Tier 2 public notifications are to be issued under certain situations. The guidance is pretty clear in the rule, and we can get back to this slide and that discussion if you wish. You can also consult with your local regulatory officials. And then there's a word on consecutive systems. So if I have a wholesale system that is supplying water to a downstream system, that downstream system is the consecutive system. And it's largely on the wholesale system to monitor at the entry point to the distribution system. But so the wholesale system has to notify any consecutive systems as violation. But the consecutive system does have some responsibilities as well. So again, lots of stuff spelled out in the rule. I'm going to go back to PFAS 101, so a little bit more on vocabulary. You'll hear people talk about long chain and short chain PFAS. That's a reference to the number of carbon atoms in the given PFAS compound. You may have noticed on the slide early on that PFOA, PFAS have some number of carbon atoms. They're 8-chain PFAS, and those are considered long chain. And so long chain, short chain, it's how many carbons are in the PFAS molecule. Largely, the long chain PFAS are the ones that are governed in the regulations. They're the ones that can bioaccumulate in my body. I think of this long thing bioaccumulating in the tissue of my body, and it does me harm. So it's mostly the long chains that are regulated, with some exceptions, right? PFBS is a short chain that gets some mention in the rule. This Gen X thing that I've mentioned is also not a long chain. So one bit of good news, the long chain PFAS are generally easier to remove than the short chain PFAS. There's one more term, carboxylates and sulfonates. So sulfonates have an S on the end, carboxylates do not. Carboxylates include PFOA, and that's my quick crash course on vocabulary. In case you're asking yourself how prevalent is PFAS, there's a lot of sources available to us all to look at this. And certainly UCMR 5, the rule, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule number 5, has us chasing PFAS compounds and sampling and seeing what we have. There's databases out there for UCMR 5. There are also things that the average member of the public might go to. This is the Environmental Working Group, EWG. They keep updating their PFAS contamination map, and it's not an endorsement of EWG, nor a condemnation of it, but it's an example of a publicly available platform where people can go look and drill into the detail of, geez, is there any PFAS near my well or near my house? And certainly the answer is yes. There are lots of sites around the United States and worldwide. And if I was just to flash the military sites, that toggling option is available on the EWG website. There are certainly plenty of military sites with PFAS hits as well. So point is, public can see this, public does see this, public asks questions, and we need to know where the PFAS is as a society, and you need to know that the public knows. So I'm going to go into drinking water treatment and PFAS. I'm going to keep honoring that time commitment here. So we talk about drinking water treatment and how do we tackle PFAS. An important note at the bottom, to start at the bottom and then work back up. When we look at traditional drinking water treatment, and you name it, if it's a groundwater system with an iron and manganese system or a groundwater system with an air stripper, none of that removes PFAS. And if we have a surface water plant with rapid mix, flocculation, clarification, filtration, none of that removes PFAS. And we could go on, right? UV doesn't remove PFAS. Ozone doesn't destroy PFAS. So it's pretty challenging, right? A lot of us are not set up with the treatment processes that do remove PFAS, but there are 3 here that are pretty darn good, right? Activated carbon, whether in the granular form or powdered carbon form, is very good at absorbing PFAS compounds. Ion exchange does a great job at swapping a chloride ion for a PFAS, and we use anion exchange resin to accomplish that. And then lastly, we might think about physically rejecting PFAS. That's not done with loose membranes, if you will. Microfiltration, ultrafiltration, not tight enough to remove PFAS. However, nano or a low pressure RO will physically reject many PFAS. There are also other novel adsorbents out there that are showing themselves to be legitimate tools in the toolbox. So thankfully, there are ways to effectively remove PFAS. Acknowledging a lot of our treatment facilities and supply facilities aren't already equipped with these, but there is hope and there is a way to remove PFAS. And so you might think it's all about PFAS, and it kind of is. In the left column, of course, we want to know, what are we treating for? Which PFAS compounds of the 9,000 are in my water? Which ones am I trying to chase down? Am I also trying to chase the short chains that aren't regulated? So there's all kinds of PFAS questions, but to me, it's super interesting. And here's one of the pitfalls in the learning outcomes. In the middle column, I better know what else is in the water. This is equally important to the PFAS data, frankly. Am I going to bury my GAC, granular activated carbon, in iron and manganese because I neglected to think about that? It has happened in the history of our industry where people say, yeah, I'm going to cure PFAS, I'm going to put in some GAC, and they neglect, say, iron and manganese or other contaminants. And then in the right-hand column, what's going to interfere with my treatment of PFAS? I'll draw your attention to natural organics, TOC, total organic carbon. It sounds benign, but those molecules compete savagely for absorption sites on GAC or anion exchange, et cetera. So the prevalence of high TOC can really decrease my service life with regard to PFAS removal. I may only get a couple of months out of PFAS removal if the TOC is super high. So point is, there's a ton to consider. It makes it fascinating, quite frankly. There's a ton to consider beyond PFAS. You'll hear people talk about testing, right? It could be bench testing or pilot testing. The bench testing is sometimes referred to as rapid small scale column tests, RSSCT. This is a means of reducing the media particle size. And when we do that, we can put treatment media into those very small columns. This is done in a laboratory setting. We collect water, we send it to a laboratory, and we run water through these very small columns of ground media. That allows folks to process a lot of water quickly and examine PFAS performance at the bench scale. And this is not a new thing. It's been done in the days of disinfection byproducts in the 90s. So this is not some new scary thing. So PFAS treatment at the bench scale, very informative. It's very quick and sheds light on what media performs better than the other media. We also can consider pilot testing, which is usually done at the project site. And just like bench testing, we can evaluate and compare technologies just at a larger scale. And you might take bench testing projections and run them at a pilot scale. So if the prior column, just to flip back, that's a teeny weeny little columns like I'm showing mounted to a board. These can be 4, 6, or greater inch diameter pilot columns to look at behavior in the field. These tests take longer in the field. It takes a while for PFAS to break through media oftentimes. So, there's the schedule thing to consider. That's kind of the theme of this talk. But it's very valuable to have it in the field. The operations staff that are going to run the facility get firsthand exposure to operating the pilot, and they kind of know what they're in for with the full-scale treatment plan. And then to talk about what extends beyond treatment, right? It's as I love to say, it's not just organic chemistry and it's not just PFAS. It's all these things in planning a project. I might have the most perfect sounding solution on paper, like, yeah, I'm going to use anion exchange to remove PFAS, and that might be cool, but is it the most cost effective? Is it the easiest to operate and maintain? Is my public going to be satisfied with this? Are my water customers going to be satisfied? There are so many things to boil into the equation, many qualitative, quite frankly, but all of that has to be done with experienced people who know water systems and can get to the right answer, right? It's not just an academic answer, it's a multifaceted answer. All right, we're going to talk about compliance approaches. And we talk about schedule. Last year, it's already been a year, but the final rule came out. Monitoring has to be complete by 2027. To me, that's pretty achievable. But compliance is due April 26th of 2029. That doesn't mean that I have to cut the ribbon and start treating for PFAS on April 20th. That means I got to comply by April 26th of 2029. So the emphasis on the compliance word in that right box. So that's a little bit daunting, to be honest, now that we're on May 2, 2025, but there are pathways to get there. And so we think about, what do I got to do? I have this PFAS problem. What do I have to do? There are a number of steps that one might consider in their PFAS journey, if you will, right? So step number one is totally non-negotiable in my book, like completely non-negotiable. Gathering data, right? Water quality data, be it PFAS data and non-PFAS data, is paramount, right? And getting a plan together, what's a concept memo or a plan of action or whatever the term you use, one has to get their feet under them to know what the path ahead looks like. And that could be done in as little as 3 months. It's a desktop evaluation, but that's where we get information on paper in an organized way and chart the path forward. After that, we may consider bench testing. We may consider pilot testing. We always consider some form of design, permitting, bidding, and construction and commissioning. If you were to add up all of these activities, add up the durations, it could be a very long time and send us way past 2029. And so, that's scary, but there are solutions, right? Obviously, first bullet at the bottom, the project complexity or the individual states' requirements are going to affect the timeline. Some states require a lot of testing and others do not, right? There's absolutely a pathway to concurrently perform, say, testing and design activities. And then bottom bullet, we can all get creative, right? It's not all design, bid, build, as we've done for decades as a water industry. There are alternative project delivery, design builds, construction manager at risk. We can also consider pre-purchasing equipment. We can identify that the treatment vessels are long lead or the pumps or the VFDs. So there are avenues to get there. Here's an example of a schedule that starts in July of this year, and it kind of goes through the progression. Again, these time allowances, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, are placeholders. Situations will vary. But again, if I just went through this progression, I get all the way to June 2029 before I'm constructed and started up. And that probably means I'm not complying by April 2029 as the rule requires. So that's a little bit of a concerning schedule, as the title implies. Here's an improved schedule with some additional thoughts baked in. So we might go to RFQ this month. We might do some data analysis starting in July, and we may or may not do some testing in the late part of this year, the early part of next year. That progression that is depicted on the timeline brings us out to a commissioning date of February 2029, which provides little time to demonstrate compliance by April 2029. However, we may consider all kinds of mitigation. We may consider feeding powdered carbon at a surface water plant to achieve mitigation in time. We may consider temporary treatment vessels to bring on site to achieve compliance by April 2029. We may prioritize the substantial completion of key systems in time. We may buy long lead items, as I mentioned before. And then in the lower left, we may consider alternative project delivery, right? There may be a model out there where we get our permits and clear the site and pour concrete early. And what we do that while the design and the other work continues. So I think it takes everybody's project delivery creativity to meet the deadline. All right, we're going to go quickly through case studies. I'm going to highlight 3 groundwater examples. We can talk surface water during Q&A if anybody wishes. So groundwater around 4 MGD, 2,700 GPM. This is a facility that's been in operation for 4 years, right? Not just built and complying just in time, but it was built 4 or 5 years ago and complying, bringing big PFAS down to non-detect. Number 2, there's a very complex 575 GPM facility to talk about. And number 3 is the Navy project that was mentioned in the advertisement for this webinar. Big PFAS near a military base, a nice round number, as it turns out, 1,000 GPM. And so case study number one was the people with very high PFAS. These folks had over 200 parts per trillion of PFAS, much less 4. And so they saw great value in bench scale testing to make sure that their plan of using GAC was going to work. It was one of the earliest jobs that I worked on. And this client did not want to have a surprise, an unpleasant surprise, that their multi-million-dollar project would not achieve their objectives. So bench testing was huge for them. They had questions about media longevity, and rather than guessing or running models, the bench testing predicted a service life of 11 months. It turned out to be a much longer service life, which was a pleasant surprise. And then there's a concerned citizens group, which was a huge story on this project that had to be navigated with clear communication. And that group wanted no PFAS at all. And that water utility had to state that, well, our objective is to remove the regulated PFAS, not all 9,000 plus PFAS compounds. But the point was that clear, confident messaging was paramount. This is a look at the PFAS in this situation. I mentioned that they have hundreds of parts per trillion of PFAS. PFOS was the worst actor of them all in this case. We look at the finished product. We have 4 GAC pressure contactors. There's GAC inside each of these 4. They can be run in series as pairs or in parallel, with all 4 going in parallel next to each other. These are very large, right? Big vessels. You can see the people. Those are real people. I'm that guy. And this facility worked well because the TOC was very low, 1 part per million. So that's huge key. We talk about treatment performance. Treatment performance was terrific. The lead vessel, when running them in series, yielded non-detect PFAS for over 2 years. So despite their very high amount of PFAS in the groundwater, the low TOC was a contributor to a nice long service life. And you can see eventually the shorter chain PFAS started breaking through, and eventually the longer chain PFAS like PFOA, PFOS started breaking through. Nice effect here, treatment performance. The plant is very proud to tell you they've treated over 1 billion gallons to non-detect, despite their huge PFAS in the water. This ended up being a pump and treat system. I'm going to go quick here, but over the course of time, we've been reducing PFAS in the native groundwater table, which is a great outcome. Here's case study 2, 575 GPM. My hope is that you can relate to one or more of these situations. So at this scale, a iron and manganese project turned into a also PFAS project. And so there was a desktop analysis, there was some work, but then we started realizing that PFAS was present as the regs ratcheted down, and PFAS had to be dealt with as well. The little spoiler alert, we've already reached the construction phase here. PFAS was detected, as I said, at the subject station and an adjacent station. An interesting graph at the bottom here. These graphs show concentration over original concentration. So bars over 1 mean that we are coming out with more PFAS than we went in with. But the point is that TOC makes a huge impact on PFAS removal. We can see that breakthrough happens a lot quicker if we have 1.5 than if we have 1 part per trillion. Going to go forward. Here's a look at what this facility ultimately looks like. This is a snazzy rendering. Again, this is under construction. We have green sand filters upstream of GAC, so we remove iron and manganese, then we remove PFAS. As a note here, we also have an aeration step to remove radon. It'd be a heck of a thing. We were thoughtful enough to look for this, but it'd be a heck of a thing if we loaded up the GAC with radon, and to the extreme if we made that GAC radioactive, right? So we don't want to do that. This same project was well estimated. Our opinion of cost was 14.7. Low bid came in at 14. So the client had good financial planning on their side, and this job got some good funding and is off to the races in construction right now. Here's the job that the Navy participated in, and this was a very good experience in my estimation. So the Navy partnered with the Brunswick Topsom Water District, who retained CDM Smith for the engineering work. 1,000 GPM groundwater facility. Here we are with the Naval Air Station at Brunswick, Maine, and here we are in the smaller circle with the Jordan Station well field. And unfortunately, the activity at this site carried forward a pretty heavy amount of PFAS toward the Jordan Station well field. And so that situation had to be managed by the water utility, and they did so successfully, protecting the customers. This is the smallest of this client's 3 water supply facilities, 1,000 GPM capacity, as I mentioned, and an array of processes. And you know, it might be interesting to water treatment people, but the point is that none of these processes, you know, removes PFAS. Brunswick Topsom did a fine job managing their well field to make sure that iron, manganese, PFAS were, you know, managed and not conveyed to the consumers at any point. It's a facility that got its start in 1907, that is. They built a current plant in 01, and not long ago, one of those novel sorbents was used to treat water in the interim and remove PFAS from the aquifer. Great work with the U.S. Navy and Brunswick Topsom Water District. That work initiated in 2022, 2023, and there was a combination of granular carbon anion exchange proposed, which is a good pairing of treatment processes. The schedule was, let's be very deliberate in the first 10% of design, and let's go off to the races after that. It's so important to get one's feet under them, as I mentioned, to make sure that we're on solid footing and we get our ducks in a row to really launch design aggressively. The Navy was eager to get construction cost certainty to report to their people. And here we certainly overlapped our design activities with bench scale testing activities. And that was a responsible thing to do and an efficient thing to do. Real quick, these people have high PFAS and low manganese on part of the well field and the opposite on the upper well field. So again, our water utility friends did a great job managing water supply. To the water chemistry people in the group, there are some hits of iron and manganese that have to be dealt with, but thankfully TOC is low in my book, right? It's not too much more than 1 part per million of TOC, which helps the longevity of PFAS removal. There was a array of bench scale tests examined. You know, taking water from the site, let's run water through a variety of treatment media and see how they each work. There is no advertisement intended in this slide, but the point is we are able to, without bias, run water through this media next to that media next to that media and see which one works best, right? I don't have a horse in the race. I just want to learn which one works best for this water utility in this particular matrix of water chemistry. So tons of work was completed quickly, right? And I think this is a product of you know, people knowing how to do projects in the right order and accelerating the right things at the right time. So, you know, largely these little checkmark bullets are put in the sequence that they occurred, and these were done swiftly, intentionally, and it really led to an efficient work product. The initial cost opinion from our project team was $19 million. There was a continuous conversation about value engineering. Do we really need that? Is this necessary to treat PFAS? And so I thought that was a very, very healthy conversation that the water utility and the Navy continually engaged in. 18.3 ended up being our estimate at 90%, down from 19. And lo and behold, 18.17 was the contractor bid. I was super proud about the accuracy of those cost projections, and the Navy got their cost certainty, certainly. And so no rest for the weary. Here are people signing the construction contract with the contractor who won the bid, and we are indeed off to the races at this point. Construction has begun. Here's some concrete placement pictures. This is a rendering of the finished product. The existing facility is on the right. The proposed facility is in the rear. As with many projects, aesthetics need to be matched to the extent possible. And here we are with iron and manganese removal, followed by granular carbon, followed by anion exchange. And so that had to be dovetailed with the existing facility and the existing pumping systems. And honestly, there's so much to these projects. It's so much more than PFAS. I'm going to talk about residuals. I think out of the corner of my eye, I saw somebody ask about residuals. And my slide is slowly transitioning. Here we are, I'm on slide, okay. The fate of spent media and membrane discharge. So, the question always comes up, what do? You absorb PFAS until you can't absorb anymore. And so the thing is here, we can consider GAC, granular carbon. We can consider hauling it off to a landfill, or we can consider thermally treating it, right? So we bury it properly, or we thermally treat it and remove the PFAS from the media. In the case of GAC, we can consider reactivating it, regenerating it, and bring it back to our site. That is not currently the case with anion exchange resin or the novel sorbents. We can't restore them quite yet and bring them back to the drinking water treatment facility. But as I noted in number 3, there's work ongoing to improve that scenario. So, all hope is not lost for the reuse of those materials. Number 5, quickly, the waste streams coming from those membrane processes do have PFAS in them. So they have to be treated or properly disposed of, and we can talk about that during Q&A as well. I am 2 minutes from being done. A mention of the public. I mentioned earlier, the public is very active these days, whether it's PFAS or taste and odor or water pressure or whatever. The public is very interested. There's a ton of information on the web. I tell people, even my mom has seen Dark Waters and Netflix, The Devil We Know, and she asked me questions. She's 79 years old, and she is not an engineer, but she has a lot of questions, and I think that's typical of a lot of members of the public. I mentioned the special interest groups. They are very active, and we can't just be engineers and water system managers. We have to be communicators, and we have to be pretty intentional about it and pretty empathetic when we're out there talking to the public, right? We can't be dismissive of their concerns. We have to be on the spot and listening to them carefully and providing a lot of clear, transparent back and forth. There are resources out there, the American Water Works Association, Water Research Foundation 5124. That's a project with some guidance for water risk communication in the water sector. CDM and Hazen collaborated on that, so there's a lot of good resources out there. And then I'm going to end with this. The PFAS regs are tough and they're stringent, but they're achievable, right? So it may seem daunting, and it is expensive, but success can be achieved, as I illustrated with my 200 parts per trillion or greater case study. Number 2, if we have a good plan, we can launch rapidly. I tried to illustrate that through the Navy example in particular, right? Really nail your early planning and then off to the races and whatever it takes. And then number 3, let's not forget, it's not just about PFAS. It's not just the people in white lab coats and the organic chemists coming in. It's really figuring out how to dovetail PFAS into your water treatment plant and for your water chemistry and your physical situation. So much to think about. Whitney, I'm out of breath and just about on time. I think I'll turn it back to you.
Well, that was great, Al, and I really appreciate that, and thank you. As a fellow Mainer, I really appreciate you showing some love to the Brunswick Topsom area, even though that's considered civilization. That was more in the western part, but still, I really appreciate that. So hey, what we're going to do now is, anybody on the call here has any questions for Al? This was great. Really appreciate the breakdown. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to use the chat and submit your questions now, because we have a little bit of time. But I'm definitely going to kick some off right now for you, Al. So what should the water utilities prioritize now to really get going and beginning the PFAS removal project?
Yeah, the question was, what should water utilities prioritize getting right out of the gate? I said it once or twice. It's that upfront organization. I don't know if it sounds neurotic to anybody, but to have a really good tabulation of PFAS data, of non-PFAS water quality data, of water production records, so we know for sure what our max day and average day demand that we're designing for, then we have some clue what the project's going to cost before we go headlong into the job. Those first 3 months are insanely important, and that's the time to do a really damn good job getting your plan together. It's also going to send a great message to your public and to your consumers that, yes, I have a plan, not, no, I don't know what I'm going to do. So that's it to me, Whitney.
Okay. All right. And then, so you say you've worked on a variety of over 50 different drinking water PFAS projects. So what are some of the lessons learned that you really have on some of these projects?
Sure. I think that thankfully I haven't been too unpleasantly surprised with lessons learned, but there've been a few. Certainly a reoccurring lesson. I have worked on over 50 of these jobs. Is it's so not all about the PFAS. Half of these jobs are like big pumping jobs where hydraulics and pumping and the electrical to drive the pumping systems is every bit as critical and front and center as the PFAS removal. It's also knowing the potential unintended consequences. For instance, GAC has some arsenic in it. It's just a naturally occurring thing. And sometimes you get a little bit of arsenic, sometimes you get a lot. So being ready, to monitor for arsenic when I put a fresh GAC facility online, that's really good, right? I don't want to be in the newspapers as having started an arsenic problem but cured a PFAS problem, right? And the same can be said for pitfalls with anion exchange, where it can initially make the water a little bit more corrosive. So it's things like that. It's the lessons learned are likely not the PFAS. It's all that goes with it. And I think with some good planning and some experienced folks in the room, we can avoid a lot of those awful surprises.
Absolutely. I believe we might have answered Rick's question, but I'm just going to ask it again, just so we can check that box. So Rick asked, what are the water supply folks doing with the disposal of the spent GAC and the resin with PFAS?
Yep. Again, it's thermally treating or diverting those materials to a landfill. But either choice is reasonable. There are folks who say, gosh, I don't want to send it to a landfill because I feel as though my water utility will forever own that material sitting in the landfill. I'd rather have it thermally treated. But those are the primary options, with the extra option of reusing granular activated carbon. So that's the short answer.
Absolutely. And so how can I future-proof my water systems in case of more PFAS regulation is coming along? Or if I'm looking at it from a global perspective, say they run out of the granular activated carbon.
Yeah, I like that. How do I future-proof? So one way to future-proof could be this. It takes more contact time with granular carbon to achieve PFAS treatment than it takes with anion exchange resin or novel sorbent. And so one future-proofing thing to answer the question could be, you say, all right, I'm going to design my treatment vessels big enough for granular carbon, and I'm going to specify the underdrains to be tight enough to retain some other media like anion exchange. So if I've gone and sized the GAC vessels that big, surely they're big enough for a different media, and they're ready to go for a different media to be put in. So if I find down the road that anion exchange removes more short chain PFAS than the GAC did, then again, I'm ready to go. I'm well equipped. I'm future-proofed, to use that phrase.
Got it. Excellent. By the way, Al has his contact information right here, and the slides will be sent out afterwards. So if there's any questions you have for him, or in regard to more specific questions, please feel free to reach out. But Al, again, thank you very much for your time. He'll stay for a couple extra minutes if you have any questions that you're still writing in. We're happy to answer it. But in the meantime, we're going to wrap up, and we have a couple additional SAME announcements. But thank you again, everyone, for participating in today's session. Really appreciate your time here today. It's always been always a very informative session and great takeaways for our post. But before we wrap up our program today, I'd like to share with you some upcoming events that we have planned. So please mark your calendar for some of the upcoming local post events, as well as some of the upcoming national events as well. Our next First Friday webinar is Building Safer Sites, How Wearable and Smart Tech Are Changing Safety, on Friday, June 6th. You won't want to miss this essential webinar featuring Lorenza Ordiones from Westco. And then, are you interested in sharing your knowledge on current educational topics for the First Friday series with our members? We're now accepting presentation abstracts for fall 2025. Please visit our website to learn more and submit your topic today. Sponsorships are also available to help support our popular program. And we are getting ready for the premier training conference of the year, the SAME JETC, which will be held May 13 through 15 in Louisville, Kentucky. There's a lot of great educational sessions, including a session with me and Bree Beal on how to use AI to help your teams win with capture planning. And Samantha Long will be speaking about her experience starting the first SAME STEM camp in Honolulu, Hawaii, through the National Leadership Development Program. So join us at JETC for the upcoming opportunity briefings, networking, awards dinner, and fun during this conference. If you are attending the conference, so join us for a photo shoot at the SAME National booth right after Wednesday's keynote session at 10:05 a.m. local time. But you can also learn more about the conference and register at samejetc.org. So we also have a very busy schedule right here at the DC Post. Celebrate the National Maritime Day with the DC and Baltimore Post with a special open house tour of the decommissioned nuclear ship, the NS Savannah, at the Baltimore shipyards on Sunday, May 18th. The NS Savannah Association is hosting the educational tour from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So meet up with your SAME friends at 1:30 p.m. No RSVP is required for this free, fun event for the whole family. Tickets are going fast for the rooftop happy hour at this historical Watergate office building. Tickets are hosted by Interior Architects and brought to you as a joint networking event with the DC Post and DBIA Mid-Atlantic region. Sponsorships are available and tickets are very limited. Register today for the lively conversation and amazing views of Washington, DC from this iconic building. And are you ready for another fun networking event? We partnered with the Nova Post and GovCon Rockstars to bring you another opportunity to network and rock climb. We did this last year. It was a great time. So don't miss this event on Thursday, June 26th at Sport Rock, Alexandria. The whole family is welcome. And save the date. The DC and Nova Post will return for our third year at the Capitol Turnaround for our 17th annual Small Business Conference for an expanded two-day event that you won't want to miss. This is our premier Mid-Atlantic conference featuring federal, state, and local opportunities focused on building your small business network with matchmaking and veteran career center. Registration is going to open up at the beginning of next week. So please mark that in your calendars. And we also have a lot more events planned for the rest of the year. Be sure to visit our DC Post website for a full list of educational and social events throughout the year. Connect with us on LinkedIn, and as we share industry news, event photos, all while building a strong network throughout the AEC industry. You can watch all our past First Friday webinars from our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to reach a global community of over 7,000 architecture, engineering, construction, and technology leaders, With an annual DC Post sponsorship, you have the opportunity to leverage our network to showcase your firm with visibility and international recognition you won't get anywhere else. Support the annual sponsorship, program sponsorship, just like this First Friday series, or at individual events throughout the year, just like our upcoming small business conference. You have many opportunities to do so. Check out the benefits of sponsorship and support a mission of DC Post in your community today. So with all of that, thank you again for attending our First Friday webinar, and thank you, Al and CDM Smith, for providing great educational content today for our May First Friday webinar. Look for the document delivery slide for the slides, PDA certificate, opt-in list of registered participants, and we'll post a recording on our DC website later on this month. You also get an email from our presenter with more information about what was presented and how you can sign up for their newsletter and announcements on upcoming events and educational sessions. And don't forget to download the chat before you leave the webinar. And lastly, thank you again to the DC Post First Friday sponsors, Fox Rothschild, KCCT, Parsons, and Stantec. So on behalf of myself, Bree Beal, and Samantha Long, have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you out at the next SAME event.